Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to concentrate on the latest on Storm Jocelyn, which is going to be battering northern areas over the course of this evening in towards Wednesday morning. Now we have seen the main weather front with the Storm Jocelyn progress through, and over the coming hours we are going to see those winds progressively get stronger, peaking across parts of Scotland around the midnight point to around 3 a.m. So pretty similar time frame to Storm Isha like we saw on the weekend. So in this video, we'll go through what's happening at the moment with the live radar. We'll have a look at the latest weather warnings, as fortunately, we haven't seen any major upgrades since the video yesterday. We'll have a look at the latest UKV to pinpoint those wind gusts, the timings with that, and we'll also have a look at the precipitation and the temperature through the rest of this week. And then we'll have a look at some of the longer range charts, because if you do hate stormy weather, well, fortunately, it is looking like it will get a little bit more settled towards the end of this week, especially further southwards, as we are going to see some higher pressure build in. But with that higher pressure, it does mean that there is little chance of anything significantly cold in the next week or two. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if we start on the live radar, you can see the big weather front associated with Storm Jocelyn has now cleared out into the North Sea, and it's pretty much disappearing off radar now. Behind it, though, we are left with lots of squally showers, and you can see how strong the winds are and how tight the isobars are, because you can see the showers, especially across Scotland, are forming into lines, and this is where it is forming along the wind direction. And you can see it is coming in from a west to southwesterly wind. And you can see there's some real big convection taking place in some areas. Risk again of some thunderstorms and some real quite torrential squally showers within this. But the main issue over the coming hours will be those winds. But we still do, as I said, have rain warnings issued in places. Further southwards, we are still going to see stronger winds through this evening. But we haven't even got any yellow warnings issued for southern England. Really, a sort of Midlands, northern England northwards. That's where we're going to see any high impact weather. Further southwards, still rain around and will continue to be squally showers over the next 12 hours or so, but we won't see anything too disruptive in terms of winds, maybe 30, 40, at most 50 mile per hour gusts. Now, with the big southwesterly winds, we are actually in some really quite mild air. Temperatures getting up towards the 13 or 14 degree mark in places. If we had a dry day today with less winds, less cloud and a bit of sunshine, then the risk we even got up towards 15 or 16 degrees, considering the air mass, which would be a day record, i.e. the highest temperature we've ever recorded on the 23rd of January. But because of the cloud and wind around, and rain, of course, it has held those temperatures down slightly. But if you have been outside today, it's going to feel fairly horrible in terms of the wind and rain, but actually pretty mild indeed, especially considering a week ago it was hardly above freezing in most areas. Now, if you look at the latest weather warnings for Storm Jocelyn, you can see how southern England and eastern England really haven't got much at all. It's the Midlands, Wales, northwards where we've got the high wind warnings. Now, if you start with the warning further southwards across parts of the Midlands, up towards northeast England and South Wales, it came into force at midday today and expires at 3 p.m. Again, the winds are going to be fairly strong. We're looking at 45 to 55 miles per hour quite likely, perhaps as much as 65 miles per hour. As I said in yesterday's video, about a 10 to 15 mile per hour winds lower than Storm Isha that we saw on the weekend. So still significant, but not quite as strong as that system we saw through the weekend. If we go further northwards, we'll actually have a look at the rain warning, across parts of Wales first. Expires at 7 p.m. this evening, so much of the heaviest rain has now cleared, but we still see squally showers, so possible of another 10 or 20 millimetres on top of this. We've got rain warnings further north across parts of the Lake District here, again expire at 7 p.m, and then another rain warning here that expires actually in only an hour or so for heavy rain across parts of central Scotland. So again, it is, I'll say here, associated with Storm Jocelyn. It is associated with that low pressure system, which is named Storm Jocelyn, but the high impact weather mainly is coming from the winds, which now arriving over the coming hours. So, as I said, over the past couple of days, it's similar to Isha, where we saw the rain move through initially, and in the subsequent hours, we've seen the very strong winds. Perhaps we could even see more high impact weather if the wind and the rain were at their peak at the same time. But luckily, in this occasion, they are separated. If you do look at the wind across northern areas, it comes into force at 4 p.m. It's about half an hour before I'm recording this, and then about 1 p.m. tomorrow it does expire. Again, we're looking at winds around the 55 to 65 miles per hour, maybe in excess of 70, and where we have the highest likelihood of those 70 plus, that is where we've got the amber warning. Again, must highlight that these winds by themselves probably wouldn't actually warrant an amber warning, or not this widespread of an amber warning, but it's because it's coming off the back of Storm Isha. It means structures, trees are going to be less resilient, having been damaged potentially or weakened through the weekend. So that's why, yes, the winds on the surface, if this just came in October or something, when we haven't had a load of storms before it, or a major storm like Isha before it, probably would only warrant a yellow, maybe a localised amber. But the reason why I've got quite a big amber here is because of the weakening effect of prior storms that we have had. Now, if we do look at that amber warning finally, it does expire at 8 a.m. tomorrow and does come in force in about an hour's time at 6 p.m. And again, it is for those 55 to 65 miles per hour up to 75 or 80, but it's the higher likelihood. If we go down to that warning impact matrix, you can see it's medium impact and medium likelihood. So no chance of any red warning here because we are not likely to see the high impacts like we saw with Isha, but nevertheless, keep reiterating, still very strong and still could cause significant disruption over the coming hours. But luckily, by the morning rush hour, the strongest winds should have passed, but it will still be fairly gusty. If we do look at the latest UKV, you can see the heavier rain moving through this morning, moving through quite quickly, but of course over the higher ground, lingering and giving some really quite heavy precipitation for a time, and that's why we've seen those yellow rain warnings. But through this evening, the rain will mostly clear, and we'll be left with those squally showers that we're starting to see on the live radar. Those continue to pack in, especially for Scotland and northern areas in general, with the very strong squally winds as well. That will progress through the evening, and eventually, as we head into tomorrow around the lunchtime, things will be much drier for all. You can see, though, a bit of rain starting to spread into the southwest, and it could give a bit more of a damp day across the far southwest for Wednesday. But for most, it is drier, and a bit of sunshine can poke through, especially in the latter part of the afternoon. Rain will continue to try and push up from the south into Thursday, and it could make a lot more progress into Thursday afternoon, and again, could give some heavier rain in places. Then we see the next system move in, but it's not having anywhere near as much success, and it does mean that the weather front moves through, but these strong winds do stay away, and this is because high pressure is starting to build in the south, and it means those weather fronts, you can see they're angled much more northeasterly to southwesterly. It's because it's coming up against the high pressure and not able to push eastwards or southwards like it would like to do. You can see here it's the high pressure over Europe trying to nudge in, holding off the lower pressure, but also wafting up some very mild air from the southwest. Now, if you look at those wind gusts, you can see the winds are starting to pick up at the moment, around the 50, 60 mile per hour, but it's really around the latter part of the evening, around 8, 9, 10 p.m, where we start to see the winds get up towards 60, 70, or even as high as 80 around that midnight to 3 a.m. point. By 6 a.m, still very strong winds, but they're starting to diminish, and by around the 8, 9 a.m, still could be exceptionally strong across the far northeast of Scotland, but for most, it is now starting to die down, and by lunchtime for all, winds are starting to look quite a bit better as it does slowly clear away. Through the rest of the week, as I said, still could be some unsettled weather around, still could be some stronger winds, but we're not expecting any more storms. As you can see, any weather front trying to push in, you can see this area of strong winds trying to push in on the weekend, loses all its intensity as it comes up against that higher pressure system, squeezing the energy out of it. If you do look at the max temperatures, no surprise, it is going to be pretty mild. You can see this afternoon, 12, 13, maybe even 14 degrees in quite a few areas. And as we head into Wednesday, of course, we will see cooler air return from the northwest as the cold front slowly sweeps through. But again, maybe 8 to 10 degrees at best, so not particularly cold air coming back in. If you look at Thursday, again, could be slightly chillier overnight with some colder upper air temperatures, but by the afternoon, the next wedge of milder air moves in, 13 or 14 degrees possible here, and then into Friday, again, could be slightly chillier, maybe it's more towards average, 5 to 8 degrees, but then by Saturday, we're turning milder again from the southwest, potentially 10, 11 degrees, we will start to move back in for Sunday. So you can see there will be some cooler interludes over the next 5 days, but generally it's going to be average to above average temperatures. Pretty typical for a west to southwesterly flow. Now we can see this all very well exemplified on the latest GFS. Now it's only run out to 264 hours here, but really beyond that is the unreliable time frame, so there's no real point looking at that. But of course, we'll update with the ensembles at the end of the video to see if there is any trends beyond that. But over the coming days, you can see the westerly winds continue, but the higher pressure starts to nudge in more, which moves that storm track more towards Iceland, keeping the strongest winds away, but still probably allowing precipitation to move in. High pressure continues to try and ridge northwards, and there have been trends over the past week or so to try and establish some northern blocking again. But because still got pretty strong tropospheric polar vortex to our north, it's not going to allow that high pressure to really move anywhere substantially. Right at 264 hours, I must say there is a little bit more hope of potentially some colder weather, as you can start to see lobes of tropospheric polar vortex sort of break apart, with this lobe moving towards Scandinavia. That could be a recipe for northerly or easterly winds if the high can try and build towards Greenland. But at this stage, I must say, no real definitive signal of anything colder, maybe into early February, but we'd have to see that high really inject itself northwards. You can see a lot of the colder air across the northern hemisphere is shoved towards Alaska and Siberia, whereas has it been recently, it's been towards North America, or last week towards Scandinavia. So the cold air is sloshing about, and in the extended range it does look like it's going to be on the other side of the pole. So even if we did get a northerly or easterly in, it probably wouldn't be as potent as last week, where we did have the very, very cold air nearby. So that is all things we need to keep an eye on, but I must say, for the time being, it is looking fairly mild, fairly westerly. There is the risk of cool weather under higher pressure with a bit of inversion taking place, but by no means is it going to be bitterly cold any time soon. But the risk is there, of course, in the longer term. Remember, we are just over halfway through winter. We've still got a good 5 or 6 weeks left of meteorological winter, and probably another 8 to 10 weeks where colder, snowy weather is possible, out to sort of middle of March, really. So still plenty of potential there, but the next week or two definitely looking like it's going to be milder, wetter, potentially windier, at least for the next few days before it could settle down into next week. And there is the risk, especially if we get that high pressure orientated in the correct direction, we could see spring-like conditions for some, for a few days maybe. Still too early, really, in the year to say proper spring-like conditions, but maybe 14, 15, 16 degrees could be possible. Now, if you do look at the GM, see what that is showing over the coming days. Again, only just updating, but it's just out to the 240 hours now. Again, westerly winds continue, high pressure trying to push northwards, but really only successful thing it does is push the storm track back towards Iceland. Right towards the end of the run, we do continue to see high pressure move towards northern areas, over towards Greenland perhaps. And interesting, the last few frames here, watch the low tropospheric polar vortex towards Greenland. This is important and could signal the risk of something a bit colder and a bit more blocked towards February. Watch what happens to all those purples. We see a lobe here head towards Scandinavia. We see another lobe head to North America, and in between we see a little bit of a gap emerging. Now here we could see higher pressure move there. If the high pressure got there, then we probably would start to draw in a northerly or easterly. Similar to the GFS, nothing majorly cold out to our northeast. You can see the upper air temperatures are actually probably slightly above average. Still very cold air, still below freezing, but above average. And as I said, that is because if we look at the northern hemisphere, a lot of the very cold air is out towards Asia here. So yeah, if we put on those temperature deviations, you can see a lot of those blues are further across the mid-latitudes, across parts of Asia, and out towards actually Alaska and western parts of United States. So it would mean if we did draw a northeasterly or easterly wind, it probably wouldn't be as cold as it could be, but we've got to keep an eye on it. At day 10, though, yes, up towards the North Pole, potentially more favourable colder conditions arriving, or more favourable colder synoptics, but across the UK it'd actually be incredibly mild with high pressure over top of us and a westerly flow. If you actually look at those 2 metre temperatures here, as said, mid-teens. So yes, things could start to turn a bit more favourable in the northern hemisphere, but towards day 10, GM is looking pretty mild indeed. Maybe day 15 range, things could look a little bit more plausible for very cold conditions, but we're not seeing that in the near future. If you do look at the ECMWF now, again, westerly winds continue over the coming days. Again, the high pressure pushing that storm track further northwards should limit any possible storm systems moving in. And right towards day 10, again, you can see a bit of a split appearing in the tropospheric polar vortex, so similar to the GM, but very similar in terms of the weather over the top of us. Very mild air mass. And a high pressure building in. You see the temperature deviation, very mild on top of us. So yeah, could see some spring-like conditions, but it could allow the risk of some higher latitude blocking as we head into early February. Could be one of those sort of transitional patterns where it starts very mild, very high pressure dominated, spring-like, but then that mild, warm high pressure moves northwards and then brings winter back in from the north or east. So that is a possibility, but we can't look beyond 10 days at this stage. And up to 10 days, the only thing I can see at this stage is milder and potentially spring-like conditions. And if you do like drier weather, definitely is looking pretty dry as well, especially from that day 7 to day 10 range. Now, if you look at the latest Ensemble, the latest GFS, you can see that milder signal as we head towards the latter part of January and early February. Definitely drier as well, but not bone dry, so still some runs pushing lower pressure in. And you can see there are some very cold runs appearing in the longer term, and that has been a bit of a trend over the past few days, but it's never gone more than sort of 5 or 10 ensemble members, and here it's only about 4 or 5 again. So the risk is there, and there is a bit of a cooling trend in the long term, but it is still above average. So definitely looks like we could be seeing some spring-like conditions into early February. Nothing crazy. The upper temperatures, yes, are mild, but we're looking at sort of 5, 6, 7 degrees above average. So would be maybe 13 to 15 degrees. We're not looking at 20 degrees, anything ridiculous like that. We need to see a proper far-fetched southerly for that. But definitely 14, 15 degrees looks possible. Very dry as well. But there could be, as we saw from the overall synoptics, a switch towards something colder beyond that. 2 meter temperatures, as you can see, are trending milder in the longer term, potentially consistently around the low teens, or maybe even towards the mid-teens as possible. So there is the risk of an inversion, but majority of runs don't have an inversion type pattern taking place because the high pressure isn't quite far north enough to keep the sort of low circulation over the top of us, where the air is not moving a lot, and we can get that trapped layer of cold air. If those isobars are more over the top of us, moving that mild air around, then we are likely to stay mild throughout the atmosphere. Now, if you look at the ECMWF just to compare, it is pretty similar. Again, it's got a cooling trend in the longer term, so that is a possibility into early February. But for the last couple of days of January, first few days of February, definitely looks like there could be a spring-like pattern starting to appear. Again, nothing ridiculous. I must emphasize that. Nothing, completely out of the ordinary. We do regularly see sort of little minor heat waves during the winters, but definitely is going to be quite a big difference to what we saw last week, where it was 0 degrees in most places. Here, most areas would be 13 or 14 degrees. But for the time being, got to get through the very stormy weather in the next couple of days with Storm Jocelyn. And slowly we can look forward to something milder and more settled over the next week or so. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.